More than 80 years ago, two Latin American legends, Emiliano Zapata and Pancho Villa, led a revolution that overthrew the government of Mexico, a government that had ignored the plight of millions of peasants in a land of plenty controlled by big landowners. Today, impoverished Mexicans are turning to a new hero, Subcomandante Marcos. He's the leader of the Zapatista National Liberation Army, mostly Mayan Indians, about 30% women, who have armed themselves over the last 10 years, one gun at a time, through donations from the Indian community. He calls himself Subcomandante because he says the real commander is a committee of Indian leaders to which he reports. But it's Marcos who has become a hero to much of Mexico. And if there's surprise at his stunning rise to cult figure status, imagine the surprise of the government when Marcos launched guerrilla attacks on the first of the year. By the time the Mexican army arrived on the scene, the Zapatistas had taken control of 4 towns. In the largest, San Cristobal de las Casas, Marcos and his troops ransacked the municipal building but carefully avoided civilian bloodshed. Over the next 10 days, however, firefights between the better-equipped Mexican army and the Zapatistas resulted in at least 140 dead. But then the Mexican government abruptly reversed policy and agreed to a ceasefire. And then formal peace talks, moderated by the Catholic Church. Although there were 19 guerrillas at the table, there was one man who stood out, their charismatic leader, Subcomandante Marcos, who grabbed the headlines and stirred the imagination of much of Mexico. Last weekend, 2 days after the peace talks ended, we set out to meet Marcos in Zapatista-controlled territory. We were led to a small village called La Guerrilla, told that Marcos would meet us the next morning. But that night, even before our campfire had burned out, Marcos surprised us.
Welcome to Mexico.
Gracias.
Inside an empty schoolhouse guarded by Zapatista guerrillas, we got our first look at the masked leader.
Do you think the army knows where you are?
Yes, approximately. So they know that I come here, but they don't know where exactly I am.
So they know the region, but not which village you're in?
Yes.
So tomorrow, when it's daylight, you can take us out and show us these areas and the villages?
Yes, you can say it. You can see the house of these people, one room for 8 or 10 people. There are children, women, men, chicken, dogs in the same room. And they live in this condition. That's the problem.
The next morning, with Zapatista escorts, we moved deeper into rebel-held territory, climbing higher in the mountains over narrow jungle trails for our meeting with Marcos. Finally, we reached a village where Marcos showed us the living conditions that helped prompt the uprising on the 1st of January.
Now, people live in here?
¿Cómo está, compa? Tienes miedo. ¿Cómo está, compa? This is the kitchen. This is the bedroom. And this is the table of dinner. That's all.
For 4 people?
Yes.
Gracias.
Gracias. Oh, it's okay.
How many times a week is he able to give his family meat or chicken or fish?
Cada cuánto comen carne de pollo, de lo que sea.
Pero carne de res, pues no. No comemos.
Of cow, nothing. Only chicken, maybe each 2 months.
Once every 2 months they get chicken?
Maybe.
Never beef from a cow?
No, forget it. There is not.
Marcos says that life for Indians hasn't changed over the last 500 years. Even the Mexican Revolution did little for them.
We want democracy. I mean, the right of the people to choose the government and the way of this government. We want liberty. I mean, every people have the right to choose one way or another way. We want justice.
So basically what it is you're asking for are basic individual rights.
Yes.
What we call in the United States life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes. In Mexico, for the Indian people, if you want food, if you want school, if you want health, you must die or kill for take this.
Marcos says that in the past, the only things that peasants ever got from the Mexican government were empty promises, not worth the paper they were written on.
We don't want more papers. We want schools, we want hospitals, we want land, we want support of the government.
Support of the government.
Yes, but again a paper. We don't trust in this government, it's the fact.
But the Mexican government says this time it can be trusted. In the March 2nd peace accord, they met 32 of the Indians' 34 demands, agreeing to provide things like better health care, education, and housing. Harvard-educated Juan Enriquez was part of the government's negotiating team.
Most guerrilla uprisings are put down by military force. Why did the government sit down to talk with these guys?
Very quickly, we realized that this was more than a guerrilla movement, that this was a movement which had some just cause, that we weren't dealing with fanatics, and that some of these demands were legitimate.
Was there a segment in the government that said crush them militarily?
Well, there's always a hard line, and there still is a hard line. We're still fighting that hard line. But I think what people have realized is that there is an important need for democratic changes in this country. There is a need for economic changes in the communities that are being left behind.
Marcos believes it's the Indian people who are being left behind. That's why the Zapatistas continue to train for war against the Mexican government. They're afraid the peace accord may be just more public relations. Marcos says he's seen calculated government PR before. Last May, Mexican troops discovered a Zapatista stronghold, but after a brief skirmish, they let the guerrillas get away. Why?
We think because the NAFTA.
NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was being debated in the U.S. Congress. Marcos says the Mexican government couldn't afford any bad publicity, certainly not a guerrilla war, and so they made a political decision to let the Zapatistas get away.
So are you saying that the government didn't do anything because they were afraid it would jeopardize the vote in the United States on NAFTA?
Yes, of course.
The Mexican government says there are about 1,800 Zapatista soldiers. Others believe there may be thousands more.
How many are you?
This is top secret.
Top secret.
Top secret.
Whatever the number, they are outgunned and outmanned by the Mexican army, which could bring thousands of well-armed soldiers into the jungle aboard assault helicopters.
Can you stand up to that?
Yes. Yes, because these choppers put these men here, and the men say, where we go? In this direction are Zapatists? Yes. And in this direction are Zapatists? Yes. And behind us are Zapatists? Yes. And in the left wing are Zapatists? Yes. So where we go?
You think you can stand up to them because of where you fight, here in the jungle?
Yes. Yes, we think this.
Where does your support come from? I mean, as old as these weapons are, they still cost money. Now, the stories have been that you've been supported by Castro, that you've been supported by the Shining Path guerrillas. I mean, I've even heard stories you were supported by Ross Perot.
Ojalá.
Ojalá, we wish, he says, and from what we saw, the Zapatistas need more than just weapons.
This is the headquarters.
The headquarters. What do you do for communications? How do you communicate with soldiers who are out in the field?
It's civil band.
Civil band radio? CB radio?
Yes, civil radio.
This is it?
Mm-hmm.
You're kidding? That's all?
Mm-hmm.
That's just your basic coming at your good buddy CB radio.
Que es muy básico.
Yes, it's the only that we have.
Truck drivers and cars use these in the United States.
Yes, we are a poor army. We don't have guns, we don't have ammo, we don't have richness, we don't have cars, even radios. The only we have is people that is accord with our struggle, and they support us. That is the fact, is the strength of the National Liberation Zapatist Army.
Let me ask you, where did you get you make the plans for the battle. Where did you get your training? How did you learn to do this?
In the books. 10 years ago, I began to read books about Francisco Villa, Zapata, U.S. Marine Corps, Green Berets.
The U.S. Marine and the Green Berets?
Yes, the manuals.
Their manuals?
The manuals. All the manuals of the U.S. Army I know very well.
So you adapted the U.S.
Yes.
Marine Corps training
Yes.
to training your men and women here in the jungle?
Yes.
He says he got the manuals from bookstores. Where? And where did he come from? There's not much Marcos will reveal about himself.
You are not from this land, these mountains, the jungle. You're not an Indian. You obviously have an education. You speak English. You speak some French, I know, some Italian. Why are you here? How did you come here?
You must choose a way in one stage of your life. You believe in some kind of right of the people. You think that the people have the right of justice, of liberty, of democracy, and you decide fight for these people.
And it's that kind of idealism that Juan Enriquez says has captivated the Mexican people.
And then he would give press conferences and he would move groups to tears. I mean, he would take groups of people from non-governmental organizations and they would come out crying over some of the things he'd said. He's a very effective, very powerful speaker.
You know, this guy really has innate talent. He's not one of our bureaucratic politicians that we get bored listening to. This is somebody we pay attention to.
Federico Estevez is a political science professor educated at UCLA who teaches in Mexico City.
He has a lot of political talent, and he clearly has a flair for PR, even with respect to this mask, this Robin Hood kind of way. You know, the defender of the poor that hides his identity. Zorro, it's like a Zorro thing as well.
In just 2 months, this masked rebel has gone from obscurity to celebrity. There are T-shirts and dolls wearing ski masks, even adoring fans.
Even with his mask, he's very good looking. He has lovely eyes, has very nice hands, and he has a very nice voice. And he writes very well.
Guadalupe Loaiza is a columnist in Mexico City.
A lot of Mexican women, they dream about him, but they don't tell that to their husbands because they will be so mad. Can you imagine?
It's true here that some people do see him as a sex symbol.
Yes, of course they do. They write about it every day. The comics are full of it. They do see him as a sex symbol, as a politician that makes a difference, let's put it that way, but also as this figure that came out of nowhere to change the gray world of establishment politics and to give it some spark.
You've become, to many people in Mexico, a cult hero. I mean, women have said that you've brought romanticism back to Mexico.
No puedo contestar eso.
You can't answer that. What would you say to the people of my country, of the United States, about you and your movement here?
We hope that your people will understand our fight, and you will understand that we are not una amenaza,
Not a threat?
Threat against the people of the United States, because it's better have a neighbor strong.
Better to have a strong neighbor.
With justice, democracy, and liberty. Yes.
Marcos says the agreement with the government will be voted on by the Indians who live up here, and then he'll have to go back to the negotiating table to finalize the pact with the Mexican government.
Suppose the government agrees to your proposal. There's an accord that goes out. The government comes back and says, okay, we agree. And then 6 months later, they still haven't lived up to the promises. It's another piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
What happens?
The war will continue.
The war
will continue.
Will continue.
Yes. It's a fact.